Thank you very much, Professor. I want to thank you, and I want to thank Nandan Nelabiji. This is quite an honor to be here today, and I know you all have lots of other things that could occupy your time, such as studying and learning the law at this wonderful university. This is the first time that I've been here, and looking at this campus, I'm very impressed. One of my protocols as I travel around the world for the American Bar Association, wherever I go, if there's a law school in the area, I make it a point to visit that law school, find an opportunity to meet with the students as well as with the faculty and the administration. And as a result of that, I have been to many, many campuses, nationally and internationally, and I must tell you, if you have not been to many other campuses, that you are very fortunate to be here on this campus. It is very impressive. 80 acres developed this way, especially on a day when the sunshine is so bright and beautiful. This is quite a special place. This university is truly a model that represents the connectivity of our modern world. I'm from Kentucky. I spent the first 2 days of this week in Boston at Harvard. I'm here to speak this morning at the Inter-Pacific Conference, here to speak with you this afternoon. I'll be in meetings with leadership of the BCI and so on going into the weekend, get home Monday night, spend a day in the office on Tuesday, and then leave for Scotland on Wednesday of next week with my wife to speak there next week. This is truly a global community, and the law is playing a huge part in making that community the reality that it is becoming. As one of the few universities in Asia that appoints faculty members from different parts of the world, this is a really unique and special model. And as a law school that has established a strong international collaborations with its American counterparts and with law firms and other prestigious institutions across the globe, this is a significant law school. Again, it is a model, and your education will no doubt leave you well prepared to access a world of opportunity either here in India or elsewhere. I firmly believe that you have all chosen wisely in your pursuit of the law. There is no degree more suited to helping solve problems right here and right now. I'm asked the question all the time, should I really go to law school? Should I really be in law school? And I'm here to tell you that from my perspective, there's not a graduate level, there's not a level of education that opens up more career paths and more opportunities than the field of law. This education that you're receiving provides critical thinking and encourages creativity, whether it is in the field of business, management, government, education, or any number of other settings. As lawyers, you will utilize every day those analytical problem-solving skills. You will improve your ability to manage projects efficiently and develop better client relationships. Then there are the skills you will learn and are learning that cannot be measured easily, like judgment and empathy, the very core of who we are as officers of the court. A democratic society requires well-trained and thoughtful lawyers to provide access to and accountability for our court system, to navigate our government's complex rules and regulations, and to ensure that our laws are fair and just. And yet, these are indeed challenging times for our world and for our profession. Our global economy is increasingly more fragile and unpredictable. The financial crisis has led to instability in the costs of housing, food, and oil, for example. It has also shaken the confidence of the world markets. This crisis has undermined the confidence of the people in government's ability to spend tax dollars wisely and still provide much-needed services such as access to the courts, health care, and education. Disasters like the nuclear accident in Japan have further shown that a local event can have international implications for our economies and for our environment. Our sense of security is also shaken by political unrest in a number of countries around the world. And each of these places, in each of these places, the rule of law will hopefully serve to temper the pressing problems facing the world community today, including poverty, economic stagnation, and conflict. Then there is the internet. New technologies have connected us in ways we never imagined. Anywhere in the world and in an instant. Facebook, Twitter, cell phones that work as computers, they all afford us the opportunity to network with family, friends, colleagues, and hopefully for all of you, someday with clients. These technologies help us conduct our business more efficiently and effectively as lawyers. But the risks are also omnipresent with respect to confidentiality, privacy, and security. These risks are prevalent enough that our association, the American Bar Association, founded a commission 2.5 years ago that is recommending amendments to professional rules in response to the globalization of law practice. The American Bar Association has approximately 400,000 members. No one has to belong to the American Bar Association. Everyone in the association is a volunteer operating on their own dime and their own time. We have over 3,500 different operating units. We have an annual budget of approximately $200 million a year, including our sections. We have offices in Chicago and Washington, and we have international rule of law programs on which we spend approximately $35 million a year to carry rule of law programs around the world, including the training and education of judges, the development of statutory progress in legislatures. Even we're involved with writing constitutions in third world countries for the development of constitutional democracy. Yes, our laws and our businesses have grown more complex. Those new technologies that I've referenced have allowed us to innovate, but our society is also evolving in other ways as cultures mix, as populations grow, as values change. The result is a more sophisticated society that requires lawyers to be well-informed and resourceful. It is a rare occasion when a lawyer is not needed to handle a divorce, the sale of a house or business, a tax problem, or an unemployment dispute. Immigration, import-export, IP, and we can go on and on and on where legal services are more and more needed all the time. I have yet to mention the critical role of lawyers in multinational business litigation or other global enterprise. Indeed, the paradigm of the legal profession today is changing rapidly to reflect the dynamic state of our society and international commerce. But our core values should not change. Whether we practice in suits or robes, whether we are called advocates, lawyers, jurists, or barristers, we should be guided by the rule of law. But what does the rule of law require of lawyers? The rule of law asks us as officers of the court to act as peacemakers for the resolution of disputes based on law rather than on force. Lawyers, for their part, should strive to be advocates and advisors. We should solve some problems and prevent other problems. Ultimately, we have an obligation to provide access to justice as competent, independent, and ethical officers of the court. The rule of law asks us to commit to the idea of dispute resolution without violence. As one of my American colleagues, Carol S. Marks, president of the Ohio State Bar Association, says, through the rule of law, people have rights and responsibilities, obligations, and duties. In a democratic society, people also have a right to dissent, to protest, and to differ. These rights are protected even when these protests go to extremes and even when the causes are unpopular. And when these protests are called into question by the government, there are systems in place to make peaceful challenges. The rule of law asks us to recognize the courts as the essential arbiter that must be respected. Yes, we can and should hold the government accountable without violence. We must also ensure that laws are enacted and enforced fairly. But as officers of the court, we must also recognize our court system as the ultimate authority, whether we are trying to settle a child custody case or consummate an international business deal. In my part of the world, in the South, in the United States, we still talk about being called to the bar. Called to the bar. We see becoming a lawyer, being a lawyer, as a vocation, an opportunity and a responsibility to make a positive difference in the lives of those that we have the privilege to serve. We know from our history, we know that an independent, adequately funded court system is the key to constitutional democracy. And we know that constitutional democracy is the key to freedom. Freedom is what all of this really comes down to. Men and women, for as long as history's been written, have sacrificed and died for freedom. We in America, you in India, have the luxury and the blessing of constitutionally protected freedom. It is for us as officers of the court to stand up, speak out, and be counted in support of our courts. The rule of law also asks us to ensure that access to the courts be preserved. The judiciary must have adequate funding to ensure this access to justice. As a consequence of shrinking budgets, state and local governments in my country have been funding the courts with less and less financial support. The crisis of underfunding in our judiciary is something that the American Bar Association is working very hard to turn around. We are working to educate the public. I don't know about your country, but in my country, a large percentage of the American public has not been taught civics for almost 2 generations. So we in the American Bar have established a task force on civics that is developing programs all over the United States to teach civics so that people understand, respect, and appreciate the importance of our courts and the need to adequately fund those courts. The rule of law also requires lawyers to respect and preserve the human rights of every man, woman, and child. As former United States Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor once said, "A nation's success or failure in achieving democracy is judged in part by how well it responds to those at the bottom and on the margins of the social order." And in the United States, we have much work to do, and we are very committed to it. Technology, for someone my age, is both a challenge and an opportunity. But even at my age, 40 years into the practice of law, I have come to understand that technology is one of the keys to the future. It comes naturally to you. For me, it was riding a bike. For you, it's operating on the internet. It comes naturally to you. And it must be fascinating as you go through your legal education to explore the ways in which you can use the internet, you can use technology to enhance your future ability to represent clients and to enhance access to the rule of law. Pro bono in our country, in America, is something that we encourage every chance that we get in the American Bar Association. We do not have adequate funding from the government for legal services. We have almost 500 lawyers going to Washington, D.C. in April, where we will be calling upon members of the House of Representatives and members of the U.S. Senate, asking them to reverse this trend that has been cutting back funds for legal services in the face of the economic problems that we're facing in our country. Under our Constitution, the courts are one of 3 co-equal branches of government. The executive branch has the military and the police authority, of course. The legislature has control of the purse, the money. All that the courts have are reason and the rule of law. And as lawyers, we have to be standing shoulder to shoulder with the courts to make sure that the courts get the funding they need to be effective. And we need pro bono representation from lawyers and more funding for legal services to assure that more people in our country have access to justice. It's clear that many in the legal community, like many Americans, are under increasing pressure from commitments to work and to family. It's harder to make a living in America today as a lawyer than it has been in my lifetime. Law firms are not hiring the number of lawyers that they were even 7, 8 years ago. Students coming out of law school are not finding as many jobs as were available 6, 7, 8 years ago. It's a much tougher time, and therefore, because revenues are less, it's much more difficult for lawyers to find the time, the additional time, to represent clients for nothing, to work pro bono. So it's a very challenging situation. Even those who volunteer their time are thinking creatively, providing video conferencing to rural Americans to assure that they have access to justice, encouraging service from attorneys who have retired. We call it the second season, asking senior lawyers, instead of going to the beach or going to the golf club, to come out into the community and provide pro bono representation. And I'm forever surprised and amazed. Our rule of law program, I mentioned $35 million that we're spending on an annual basis right now for rule of law programs around the world. That money that's being spent is spent on administrative support, travel, housing, expenses. The lawyers who with their spouse or significant other are traveling to not some of the most luxurious places around the world to volunteer as lawyers providing services in immigration, writing of statutes, educating of judges, and so on. They're donating all of that time. They're not being paid for any of that time. That's all contributed on a voluntary basis. Technology helps them do that, and video conferencing, for instance, allows us to support those lawyers around the world without the added costs of travel, housing, and so on. Face-to-face contact still remains critical for problem solving, but also for maintaining attorney-client relationships and for mentoring other lawyers. I mention relationships because that is what volunteerism builds, relationships between the public and the judiciary and the lawyers as officers of the court. We learn about areas of practice in doing pro bono that are outside our usual areas of legal expertise. We develop new practice skills and sharpen the ones we already have in providing pro bono legal services. Volunteerism, whether it's pro bono or whether it's serving in civic leadership in nonprofit organizations in the community, it really is not just what we do, it is who we are. I like to say it's part of our professional DNA. And I have put this challenge out for 20 years, back when I was in the leadership of the business community in Kentucky and Southern Ohio, and I was teased, I'll say, about with lawyer jokes and frivolous lawsuit allegations and that sort of thing that can come from the business community from time to time. I would always respond with the challenge to every business person with whom I worked: find me a nonprofit anywhere in America that doesn't have at least one lawyer giving time and or money and or expertise and or legal skill and so on, and I'll take you and your spouse or your significant other to any restaurant in the community that you want to choose, and I'll pick up the tab. And I'm happy to say that for 20 years, nobody has come back to me with a nonprofit saying no lawyer is involved. It is really amazing in my country how much volunteer service lawyers give on an ongoing basis. In fact, in the ABA Journal, we have in the back of the journal, have any of you ever seen the ABA Journal? Have you ever had a chance to see that in the library? If you look in the back of the ABA Journal, which comes out every month, since March of last year, March of 2010, you will see a section called Lawyers Giving Back. And you will see in that section are action photos of lawyers volunteering their time and services, and a little vignette explaining what they're doing in the community, how they're improving the quality of life. And we have a long list of those who have submitted materials, or others have submitted the materials about them. And we are going to continue to publish that, just to remind people that lawyers do volunteer. There's not a profession in America, at least, that comes close to the amount of time and services that are volunteered by lawyers. Dr. Martin Luther King once said, "We are prone to judge success by the index of our salaries or the size of our automobiles, rather than by the quality of our service relationship to humanity." The quality of how we serve humanity as lawyers can be measured by our dedication to helping the most vulnerable in our society and by our dedication to the rule of law. That is why the ABA works to increase public understanding and respect for the rule of law, the legal process, and the role of the legal profession at home and throughout the world. It's why we work to hold governments accountable under law. It's why we work for just laws, including human rights and a fair legal process. It's why we work to ensure meaningful access to justice for people all around the world. The first time I stood in a courtroom and looked up and said, "Bill Robinson, Your Honor," representing Mary Smith or Tom Murphy or whoever it might have been, I recognized the very first time that practicing law and representing others was the most significant thing that I could ever do in my career. It's probably the reason that I've never run for political office, because I have found the profession of law, the practice of law, the representation of others to be so meaningful, such an enhancement of my own life experience. I really do see it as being called to the bar, and I do consider myself privileged to have the opportunity, the right, and the responsibility to practice law. I hope that all of you in this classroom will have a chance to stand up in court and do the same thing. I promise you there's nothing quite like it. And when the days get a little bit long and speakers up here who come in from other countries are a little bit boring, and you're wondering whether you made the right move or you didn't, think about the fact that there is out there a small business or a family or a cause that, but for you and what you're studying and your preparation, your hard work and your dedication, they're going to go down the tube. They're going to go down the tube because they're not going to have your unique personal characteristics enhanced by the wonderful education you're getting here, so that you can stand up for them because they cannot stand up for themselves. That's what this education is really all about. It's about making a positive difference in the lives of those you will have the opportunity and the privilege to serve. Thank you very much.